Strangers, we recently had guests stay for a few nights and they raved about our Miracle Made sheets. Our guest room doesn't have a radiator in it, so we use a space heater. That can make the temperature in there a little uneven, but with the Miracle Made sheets, our guests stay comfortable at the right temperature all night long, regardless of what the room around them is doing. God forbid they have to get up and use the bathroom in the middle of the night, but that's their problem. As for sleeping, our guests are always comfortable. Miracle Made sheets are made with silver-infused fabric with technology inspired by NASA. That fabric helps regulate body temperature and helps prevent almost 100% of bacteria growth, which means you're not lying in a bacteria farm. It also means less laundry. It's like artificial intelligence, but for your sheets. And unlike AI, Miracle Made sheets require less water. Upgrade your sleep or give the gift of better rest. Go to trymiracle.com/strange to try Miracle Made sheets today. You'll save over 40%, and when you use promo code STRANGE, you'll get an extra 20% off, plus a free 3-piece towel set. They make an amazing gift, and with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk. That's trymiracle.com/strange, code STRANGE at checkout. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. How do you go about untangling a mess of knots when you can't see where it all begins and ends? How do you convince people that the system supposedly in place to protect the innocent not only didn't protect the innocent, but didn't care enough about them to give them the justice they deserved? What's the point of setting a target for blame without confirmation that it's truthfully being assigned? And how can the human spirit, in community with like-minded people, fight back to reverse this course? Welcome to Strange and Unexplained with me, Daisy Egan. This is part 2 of a two-parter about the so-called West Memphis 3, a moniker that, we will learn, is a misnomer. In this episode, we're picking up where we left off in the mid-90s with a teenage Damien Echols on death row and teenagers Jason Baldwin and Jesse Misskelly in prison for life, all with no physical evidence tying them to the murders of Christopher Byers, Stevie Branch, and Michael Moore. Damien was not executed on May 5th, 1994, as he'd been sentenced to be. With all the media attention, a documentary crew traveled to West Memphis to make a documentary for HBO titled Paradise Lost: The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills. Metallica had caught wind of the case because, of course they had, because they'd literally been implicated in a triple homicide by way of their music. They were pissed. So pissed, in fact, that they let Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky, the filmmakers, use their music as a soundtrack to the documentary. Lars Ulrich, drummer and founding member of Metallica, would later say, quote, "It was the least we could do. They were outsiders who didn't fit in to what the community wanted. I could definitely identify with them. We all could." End quote. Paradise Lost: The Child Murders of Robin Hood Hills was released on HBO in 1996 and garnered a lot of attention. 3 people particularly affected by the film were friends Burke Sauls, Kathy Bacon, and Grove Pashley, who flew to Arkansas to become more involved in the case and set up a website to draw more attention to the case and help raise money for the defense team. An article in Rolling Stone from 2016 titled Paradise Lost at 20 quoted Berlinger as saying their, quote, filmmaking philosophy was to treat the audience like a jury, quote, adding that they had initially adopted that approach with Brothers Keeper, their 1992 doc about one of 4 elderly brothers charged with murder. You don't answer every question. The best way to persuade somebody to your point of view is to have this unbiased approach where you let the audience weigh the information. There's a lot in the film that makes you question Echols' guilt, so if you're in the audience, you can come to your own conclusion that these guys did not get a fair trial or must be innocent. It's a much more powerful and persuasive filmmaking experience, more emotional and much more active, end quote. In a piece for the publication Studies in Documentary Film titled Paradise Lost and Found, Popular Documentary, Collective Identification, and Participatory Media Culture, Dr. Angela J. Aguayo says, quote, "The narrative presented by Paradise Lost runs starkly counter to the local news reports and legal discourse circulating about the case at the time of the trial. The films depict the now famous media storm being staged, including reporters practicing their news reports and a grieving mother experiencing moments of excitement about being interviewed on television. This rhetorical strategy encourages a critical reading of the mainstream media and a view of its products as caricatures of reality," end quote. The documentary spends some time focused on John Mark Byers, Christopher's stepfather, who is undoubtedly an eccentric character. He seemed to fancy himself something of a fire and brimstone type preacher, even though he wasn't an ordained member of any church. He seemed very comfortable in front of the camera. In the film, he stands on the spot where the 3 boys' bodies were found, describing their injuries, yelling about Lucifer, and promising to spit on the graves of Damien, Jesse, and Jason. But it was his actions behind the camera that were most alarming. Apparently, in December of 1993, while the crew was filming, Byers gave the cameraman a knife. According to the Rolling Stone piece, quote, "We were at the Byers' home, and one of the cameramen took a nap," Berlinger recalls. "Mark woke him up, rubbing his arm, and said, 'I think you and I are kindred spirits. I have a present for you. Don't tell Joe or Bruce. This may save your life one day.'" He told us the story later, which we all thought was very odd. "And when we opened the knife, there was blood in the hinge. It was a tremendous moral dilemma," he continues. "What do you do? We've built relationships and trust with people. Turning over a knife that is potentially evidence would destroy that relationship. How do we handle that without killing the film project? For me, it was a big philosophical issue. We didn't want to gratuitously point suspicion toward the father of a victim, but it was a moral obligation to turn the knife over, even if it damns the film," end quote. They did, of course, turn the knife over because they had to, and tests proved inconclusive, but Byers was not a suspect anyway. Berlinger continued, quote, "He was very hurt and angry initially, but he ultimately understood. I don't think it would be revelatory for me to say I think he enjoyed the process of being filmed. He took what we had to say, he digested it, processed it, and we moved on," end quote. Byers was not the only one behaving in a way one might describe as anachronistic. There's a scene in Paradise Lost in which Pam Hicks, Stevie's mother, is being interviewed for a local news broadcast. The documentary crew captured the moments just before the interview begins in which Pam is laughing and does not seem to believe her luck that she gets to be on TV. She dons Stevie's Boy Scout's neckerchief on her head. When the man interviewing asks her if she feels guilty, she says it wasn't her fault. I've said it before, and I'll say it 75 million times more. People grieve in all kinds of ways, but I don't know a parent on this earth who wouldn't blame themselves for their child's death. Yes, of course you were at work, but I don't know, I'd be like, yes, it was my fault. I should have been with him. I should have said he wasn't allowed on his bike. I should have locked him in his room until he was 30. None of these things is rational, of course, but neither is grief. Listen, Pam's behavior is fucking odd. There's no way around it. But persecuting people because they're weird is the thing we're not doing. Being weird doesn't make you guilty. It just makes you weird. Strangers, when dinner time hits and your fridge is full of question marks, ButcherBox has your back. Start the year strong with high-quality protein delivered right to your door, including kid-friendly favorites that make weeknights easier for the whole crew. When I was little, there was a butcher my mom went to a few times a week, but it seems like small butcher shops are almost non-existent these days, and I'm just not comfortable with grocery store meat. That's why I love ButcherBox. ButcherBox delivers over 100 premium protein options straight to your door, including 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, crate-free pork, and wild-caught seafood. For over a decade, ButcherBox has led the industry with meat and seafood that's antibiotic-free, hormone-free, and independently verified. It's the clean, trustworthy protein you want to be eating, especially at the start of a new year. We have loved everything we've gotten from ButcherBox, from the sirloin steaks to the chicken breasts. Everything has been delicious and clean. As an exclusive offer, new listeners can get their choice between organic ground beef, chicken breast, or ground turkey in every box for a year, plus $20 off when you go to butcherbox.com/unexplained. That's right, your choice of organic ground beef, chicken breast, or ground turkey in every box for an entire year. Plus, $20 off your first box and free shipping always. That's butcherbox.com/unexplained. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you. The guy interviewing her asks her if she thinks the killers were worshiping Satan, and she says yes. I mean, just look at them. They look like punks. This was all, mind you, before anyone was found guilty. It was before the trials even started, as far as I can tell. And speaking of weird, the guy interviewing her then asks her if she thought about suicide. What? Sir, are you okay? Even Pam is like, what? Meanwhile, appeals had been filed. According to the West Memphis 3, an account, quote, attorneys for Misskelly, Baldwin, and Echols each filed appeals to the Arkansas Supreme Court. The Supreme Court issued a unanimous opinion on February 19, 1996, upholding Jesse's conviction. 10 months later, in a 93-page opinion, the 7 justices unanimously upheld the convictions of Baldwin and Echols, end quote. The HBO documentary was released in 1996 and made a major impact. One person deeply affected by the film was a young woman named Lori Davis, who became determined to help get justice for the so-called West Memphis 3. In this mission, she moved to Arkansas. She and Damien fell in love, and they married in 1999. Musicians such as Henry Rollins, Patti Smith, Ozzy Osbourne, and the Chicks were also outraged by what they considered to be the incredible injustice done to the 3 accused. In 2002, Rollins released an album featuring Iggy Pop and Lemmy Kilmister called Rise Above, 24 Black Flag Songs to Benefit the West Memphis 3. Rollins told Rolling Stone magazine in 2011, quote, the trial reeked to high heaven. I find myself up at 3:30 a.m. thinking about Damien. He could have been me. I had those records. I was sullen as a teenager, end quote. Rollins also organized a massive concert fundraiser and by 2005 had raised $100,000 to go toward DNA testing of the hair found on and around the victims, which had, by the way, never been tested. The hairs were finally tested in 2007, and not only did they officially not belong to Jesse Misskelly, Jason Baldwin, or Damien Echols, they were found to be not inconsistent with Terry Hobbs, Michael's stepfather, and his friend David Jacoby. But that still wasn't enough to get Damien, Jesse, and Jason a new trial. Although a whole movement had kicked off with the first installment of the Paradise Lost docuseries, Damien, Jason, and Jesse were still in jail by 2007. Paradise Lost, The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills, won an Emmy for Outstanding Informational Programming in 1997 and earned nominations at Sundance and the Independent Spirit Awards. According to the Rolling Stone article, the filmmakers were still not done. Winning awards is awesome, but the point of their film was the injustice that was still, well, not resolved. Berlinger told Rolling Stone, quote, it's a very bizarre experience winning an Emmy while the guys the film is about are still in prison. And one is on death row. We were haunted by the fact that the film was not moving the needle on the case, so we decided to keep going. And we made a fundamental shift philosophically, end quote. And so, in 2000, Berlinger and Sanofsky released Paradise Lost 2, Revelations. And while the first film tried to present the case as dispassionately as possible, this installment presented theories by several West Memphis 3 advocacy groups. Christopher's stepfather, Mark Byers, looked like a good suspect in the children's murder. He agreed to take a lie detector test on camera and passed. Berlinger told Rolling Stone, quote, "I look at Paradise Lost 2 sometimes and I cringe. I think we were too hard on Mark," end quote. And then Peter Jackson of the Lord of the Rings franchise fame, as well as the recently covered iconic queer classic Heavenly Creatures fame, started communicating with Damien's wife and champion Lori. Jackson and his wife Fran shepherded their own investigation, which was far more thorough than the one originally done by police. But, of course, that bar was extraordinarily low. According to a piece in Collider from 2023, Jackson's film West of Memphis, quote, premiered at Sundance and at the Toronto Film Festival, received a nomination for Best Documentary Screenplay from the Writers Guild of America, and was one of the last films to receive a perfect 4-star rating from Roger Ebert before the prolific and influential film critic's death in 2013. West of Memphis, despite retreading much familiar territory that the Paradise Lost films covered, as Ebert pointed out, was so successful and necessary because it has the benefit of hindsight. And while hindsight is 20/20, it is believable that anyone could have had a blind spot to the failures of the investigation and would have joined the witch hunt out of righteous anger, regardless of the actual evidence or lack thereof, end quote. The difference between West of Memphis and the Paradise Lost documentaries was ultimately time. In his telling of the story, Jackson held a microscope up to many old characters who got off scot-free in this case. First of all, Vicky Hutchison, the woman from the Orgy in the Woods story, came forward and was like, "I was high out of my mind and made the whole thing up, and I feel fucking awful about it." Jason's prison roommate, who claimed Jason confessed to him, also came forward to be like, "I was huffing pretty much whatever I could get my hands on at the time, and I completely made the whole thing up, and I feel fucking awful about it." A neighbor said she saw the 3 boys on their bicycles sometime in the early evening on May 5th. She remembered because she always went to church on Wednesday evenings, and she was on her way to church. The boys were heading in the direction of Robin Hill Woods, with Terry Hobbs hollering after them to head home. At the time, she said she didn't think anything of it. And speaking of Terry Hobbs, the documentary West of Memphis strongly suggests that Terry Hobbs participated in the murders. First, there were the 2 hairs found at the scene that did not match Damien, Jesse, or Jason, but did match Hobbs and his friend David Jacoby. It wasn't a slam dunk match. The DNA matched 1.5% of the population. Of course, Terry Hobbs just happened to be one of the 1.5% that lived in the same town and was the stepfather of one of the victims. Strangers, we are in the thick of winter, so you know what that means. My Quince Mongolian cashmere sweaters are in heavy rotation. I have one in Merlot, 2 in gray, 1 in light blue, and I just added a blue cardigan to the lineup. I'm obsessed. Quince has everything, from washable silk skirts and tops to leather jackets, jeans, and even accessories. I gave my dad a cashmere scarf from Quince for Christmas, and he absolutely loves it. It's warm and looks great with a puffer jacket or his dressy wool coat. Very fashionable. Quince works directly with safe, ethical factories and cuts out the middleman so you're not paying for brand markup. Just high-quality clothing. Quince uses the highest quality materials like 100% European linen and organic cotton. Everything is built to hold up season after season. The stitching, the fit, the fabrics, these are pieces you'll reach for over and over. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/strange for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/strange to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/strange. Hobbs had a long history of abuse, including an admitted assault on his wife and accusations of child beating and assaults on neighbors. After the accused's convictions, Terry Hobbs told the press, "Those guys took a life, let them lose a life." In addition to wishing execution on these teenagers, Hobbs added that he only wished he could have 10 minutes alone with them to do to them what they did to the boys. And again, people do and say some wacky shit in grief, but Jackson's investigation uncovered years of charges and allegations against Terry Hobbs. He had had an extremely violent past and a criminal record. Witnesses claimed he'd beaten his ex-wife and baby and had broken into a neighbor's home and assaulted her. He had regularly beaten his stepson, oftentimes with a belt buckle, leaving massive welts on the little boy. He was never investigated in connection with the murders. Even his alibi for the night, David Jacoby, said Terry left his house for a couple of hours. There is another part of this whole story that, as much as I hate it, is mentioned enough in all the research that I feel like I should bring it up. Some people familiar with Terry claim to have witnessed him on several occasions kissing and/or holding hands with David Jacoby. If these rumors are to be believed, the worst-kept secret in West Memphis, Arkansas was that Terry was, at least, bisexual, which I don't think was something looked upon tremendously kindly at that time or place. When I heard this, I thought the boys had stumbled upon Terry doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing, and he, in a methed-out rage, killed them. They wouldn't have been the first or last victims of someone's misplaced shame. Terry was allegedly seen later that evening doing laundry, which I guess was so unusual an activity for him that it stuck out. But, in the interest of fairness, I feel like I need to afford Terry at least a modicum of the same doubt I gave to witnesses Vicky and the prison cellmate. There seems to have been an awful lot of he said, she said going on in this community. Most of it is based on manufactured fears of Satanism and queerness. Here's something else the new investigation uncovered. Remember when I pointed out that the injuries to the boys didn't seem to me to be consistent with a large serrated knife? Remember when I rhetorically asked how one would even go about skinning a very small penis? The area in which the three boys' bodies were found was known to be a feeding ground for alligator snapping turtles. The kids in the area used to call it Turtle City. Peter Jackson's team found John Richards, an alligator snapping turtle breeder, and had him run a test on a dead pig to show what kinds of injuries the turtles might inflict in a relatively short period of time. Richards shows what kind of damage the turtles can do. I have to say, it looks pretty consistent with the injuries the three boys sustained. There are even what are clearly scratch marks made from something that looks like a claw, and triangular-shaped injuries. Richards explains that turtles will go for the softest parts of the flesh that are most accessible, i.e. genitals, ears, and lips. Not only that, but the lack of blood around the injuries shows that they were made after the boys were already dead. The cause of death for the three boys was head trauma and drowning. The knife was introduced as having possibly caused the various scratch marks on the boys' bodies. To be honest, I don't know if the prosecution tried to argue that the knife could have been used on Christopher Byers' genitals. I suppose one might try to argue that the killer might have used a knife on the victims after they were dead, but during the initial trials, the knife was presented as a possible weapon in the murder of the boys, even though the cause of death for the three boys was not stab wounds or loss of blood. Not only that, but as I brought up in part 1, despite the so-called occult expert Griffiths claiming there were, quote, trappings of occultism in the killings in the scene, there were none of the so-called telltale signs of any kind of cult activity anywhere on or near the boys' bodies. Why on Satan's flaming hell rock would a Satanist not carve a pentagram into the body of their victim? Isn't that like their calling card? Why would they even bother introducing a huge serrated knife if there are no wounds consistent with a huge serrated knife? Where were the 9-inch stab wounds? Why would someone holding a large serrated knife not use it to kill their victim? Why would they go to the trouble to mutilate one of the boys' genitals but not all of them? Why were the wounds on Christopher Byers' genitals not consistent with a large serrated knife? It's almost like the prosecution thought everyone was either too stupid to notice or wouldn't care about the fates of the children accused in this horrific crime. And yet, Judge Barnett, who'd been the judge in the original trials of all three boys, didn't consider any of this enough reason to bring a new trial. If there's one thing judges hate more than anything, it's having to admit they were wrong. But Judge Barnett was running for some kind of office, which meant, if elected, the West Memphis Three would finally have someone else making decisions about the rest of their lives. And so, finally, in November of 2004, with Barnett finally gone, the Arkansas Supreme Court ordered a new trial to consider newly discovered evidence in the case against Damien, Jesse, and Jason. The prosecution was scrambling to revisit their flimsy case from long ago in consideration of new evidence and a deeply activated cultural awareness that had resulted from the West Memphis Three movement. Things weren't looking good for the state in the face of a new trial, and so they came up with a rare legal loophole to present. Strangers, if you're looking to refresh your home but can't afford a full renovation, try upgrading your blinds. It's amazing what new blinds will do to a room. But why waste a Saturday wandering around a blind store when 3-Day Blinds brings the showroom to you? Spend your Saturday brunching, not blind shopping. We shop for everything from clothes to food at home, so why don't we shop for blinds at home, too? With 3-Day Blinds, you choose from thousands of options that fit any budget or style. Plus, from light filtering and blackout blinds to motorization and smart blinds that work with Alexa, 3-Day Blinds is a real upgrade to your home, not just a replacement. 3-Day Blinds has been in business for over 45 years, and they've helped over 2 million people get the window treatments of their dreams, so they are a brand you can trust. Plus, the expert team at 3-Day Blinds handles all the heavy lifting. They design, measure, and install so you can sit back, relax, and leave it to the pros. Right now, get quality window treatments that fit your budget with 3-Day Blinds. Head to 3dayblinds.com/strange for their buy one, get one 50% off deal on custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery. For a free, no-charge, no-obligation consultation, just head to 3dayblinds.com/strange. One last time, that's buy one, get one 50% off when you head to the number 3, dayblinds.com/strange. If there's one thing prosecutors hate more than anything, it's having to admit they were wrong. And so in August of 2011, the prosecution offered the three men an Alford plea in which they would plead guilty while still maintaining their innocence, which is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life. It just feels like a way for the courts to not accept blame for something they know they did wrong. Jason did not want to accept the deal. Once again, he was not comfortable lying, but this time, unlike 18 years earlier, when his lie could have condemned Damien and given him a lesser sentence, this time, his lie would set Damien and Jesse free. In his journal at the time, Damien wrote, quote, "The prosecutor wanted all three of us, Jesse, Jason, and me, to take the deal, or there would be no deal." Over the years, Jason had grown to love prison. His circumstances were not the same as mine. He had a job, he had befriended the guards, and he was actually looking forward to next year in prison school. Jason has also said previously that he wasn't willing to concede anything to the prosecutors. I understood that with all my heart, and I knew he still believed he would be exonerated one day and walk freely through the prison gates. But the state was too corrupt to ever let that happen. I was trapped in a nightmare, chained to someone I couldn't communicate with. I paced back and forth in my prison cell, 2 steps to the door and then 2 steps back. Over and over and over I paced, at all hours of the day and night. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't read, couldn't even sit still. I wept, I cursed, I raged. To see home so close and yet still beyond my reach was pain beyond articulation." End quote. But when the day came, all 3 men accepted the Alford plea and walked out of prison free men. 18 years after walking in. Scott Ellington, the new prosecutor, made a public statement which included, quote, "I have no reason to believe that there was anyone else involved in the homicide of those 3 children," end quote. The prosecutor made a public statement claiming the men were still absolutely guilty of the murders of the 3 young boys in 1993, but this would save the state a lot of money in civil suit fees. Fuck you, dude. I'm sorry, but honestly, fuck you. Yes, these men are guilty of murdering 3 children and could therefore likely kill again now that they're free, but it saves us some money? Are you kidding me? Just admit you were wrong. At the time of their release, Dan Abrams, a legal analyst for ABC News, said, quote, "This is not a technicality. There were legitimate questions about whether these 3 were responsible for the crime they were convicted of. The prosecutor wouldn't have released them if he thought he could get a conviction," end quote. In other words, rather than risk losing at trial, the prosecutor set the men free. You tell me how an agreement like that protects anyone other than the prosecutor's office. Because let's pretend he really does think they're guilty with 0 evidence and no willingness, it seems, to test the evidence that is sitting there. He must have his reasons, right? He must know something the rest of us don't. There must be some smoking gun. And if he really does think they're guilty, he's literally putting the public at risk by setting them free. All for what? To save face? To save the taxpayer from another costly trial? You know what would have saved the taxpayer? A fair trial to begin with, not paying for 3 innocent men to rot in prison for 18 years. Damien agrees with me. He wants the record set straight. He has asked for the DNA to finally be tested. According to the Innocence Project, Damien filed an appeal in 2023 for DNA testing and was denied by a judge, citing the fact that Damien was no longer in prison as the reason. It should be noted that at the time, Arkansas law did not limit access for DNA testing to incarcerated individuals only, and Damien immediately appealed this ruling to the Arkansas Supreme Court. And also, what? Who cares if he's in prison or not? Everyone knows that unless they've died, the person or persons who killed Michael, Stevie, and Christopher are still out there. Why on earth would you not test the evidence to find out who they are? Who does this benefit? That's a rhetorical question. Finally, in mid-2025, Second Judicial Circuit Judge Tanya Alexander approved the request to test all the evidence in the case, which included, according to K8 News, quote, the ligatures, more ligature hairs, Terry Hobbs hairs, branch body hairs, Byers body hairs, scout cap hairs, blue pants hairs, tree stump hair, dyed hair from white sheet covering branch, blue jeans, blue wallet hair, Byers ligature hair, Stevie branch hair from ligature, hair from lower body of Christopher Byers hair from perineum, 1 hair from sheet, end quote. Apparently, we're still waiting for the results of that testing. In 2023, I met Damien Echols at a podcasting convention. Honestly, I don't even think I realized who he was at first when I met him. I knew he was a looming figure in the world of true crime, but I didn't really know how. His wife Lori told me she was a fan of my show, which was so nice, but beyond that, I was kind of shrug. It wasn't until we were all introduced and he gave a quick speech that I realized who he was. One thing he said in that speech that stuck with me was, quote, "It's not the West Memphis 3, it's the West Memphis 6, end quote. Because in addition to the so-called West Memphis 3, the accused, there are still 3 dead children who never received justice and whose killer is presumably still out there. And then there are the families of the West Memphis 6. There are 6 families that were robbed of years and lifetimes with their children. Families who didn't get to see their children grow up. Families whose lives were consumed by the deaths, and the wrongful convictions. In 2011, in an interview for KATV, Stevie Branch's mother Pam Hicks said, quote, "I want true justice, and now we'll never know. I thought there was going to be a trial, and them crackerjack police officers and attorneys, the investigators that was on this case in 1993, they messed up. And now the state of Arkansas, it's like they want to sweep it under the rug and it's over. It's over for everyone else, but it continues to live on for me, every day." End quote. Mark Byers died in a car crash in 2011. Before his death, he'd decided, like most rational people, that Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Misskelly had been wrongfully convicted in the death of his stepson. It seems most parents of the victims have come around, except for Terry Hobbs, who maintains his innocence and seems to still think they got the right people the first time around. It should not be lost that Lori Davis, Damien's wife, pounded the fucking pavement for Damien and is one of the main reasons he was set free. The woman was like a dog with a bone. Flowers to her. What's scariest to me about cases like this one, of which there are many, where law enforcement and the media come up with a verdict before any evidence has been presented, is the willingness of those who are paid to protect us to knowingly railroad innocent people in the interest of political points, while letting the actual perpetrators continue to have the freedom to perpetrate. Sure, sometimes they just get it wrong. But sometimes they get it wrong so spectacularly and with such glaring oversight that it feels legitimate to assume that sometimes they know and don't care that they got it wrong, which means they know and don't care that the person actually responsible is still out there. Ironically, while Damien points out that people were quick to judge and toss aside people like him, it was precisely because of people like him that he ended up getting the attention he needed to ultimately walk out of prison a free man with his two compatriots. Though it cannot be stated enough, not exonerated. The prosecution refuses to put on their big kid underwear and admit they fucked up. They know they did. Everyone knows they did. It's like we all paid to see an opera and got a circus instead. Which is not to put down circuses. Some of my best friends are in the circus. It's just so stupid. Strangers, Valentine's Day means celebrating the ones we love most. For me, that means my dogs. I mean, I guess also my husband and kid, but let's face it, no one loves us like our dogs, so don't they deserve a lot of love back? Celebrate the ones you love the most by giving them the best, highest quality ingredients with Ollie. Ollie is the kind of meal dogs actually get excited about. Ollie uses human-grade recipes backed by vet nutritionists and crafted with culinary experts, so even the pickiest eaters will show more excitement during mealtime. You can tailor your meal plan to meet your dog's specific needs, and you get perfectly portioned meals in mess-free packaging delivered right to your door. Plus, the Ollie app offers on-demand health screenings where you can tap real experts for pup peace of mind. It uses data from the Ollie pack to develop new recipes and products for your dog. My dogs Pops and Noodle love Ollie, and I can definitely tell the difference. With Ollie, they have more energy and they're so excited at mealtime. Celebrate your number one Valentine, your greatest love, your dog. Head to ollie.com/strange, tell them all about your dog, and use code STRANGE to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/strange and enter code STRANGE to get 60% off your first box. And what can we do moving forward to ensure that we don't jump to conclusions about people based on what they look like, what books they read, or what music they listen to? It's very scary to know that those elected and paid to serve and protect us might not always have our best interests in mind, but those people can be fired or voted out. What may be scarier is our own propensity for judging those around us based on very little information. We cannot fire or vote ourselves out. If the prosecution is going to continue to act like a little bitch just to save face and not give Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Misskelly the true freedom they deserve, and not give Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch their justice, and knowingly let the real killer or killers walk around, it's up to us to do better. Part of our responsibility is in being educated about and aware of who we're voting for. The district attorney's office is supposed to represent the people. That's the whole opening thing to Law and Order. In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. We are the people to which Law and Order refers. We have to pick representatives who, to the best of our knowledge, will actually represent us and not their own interests. When we go to vote, and there's a whole page of local judges we've never heard of, we have to know what their record is like and how they tend to rule. Those positions are important. I have two family members who were prosecutors for New York, and they will tell you that what we read in the news or see on TV isn't enough to really understand what goes on inside the courtroom. When a jury's decision is confounding, we need to understand that there is more to the case than what we are privy to. And I'm sure that's probably true, but when there are cases like this, where 20 years later it has become so glaringly obvious that the so-called justice system swept up 3 innocent children in their quest for good numbers, it's hard to continue to blindly give the benefit of the doubt. There are too many cases like this. Cases where confessions are coerced or bribed for. Cases where minor suspects are questioned without a parent present, let alone a lawyer. Cases where parents were present, but are so terrified of the police that they too go along with coercive tactics. Cases where lawyers are inept. Cases like the Central Park Five, where police and then the media made up their minds about the suspects based on almost nothing but their skin color and economic circumstances. Cases where facts were manipulated to fit suspects. Cases where children were literally scared to death of the police, and so just told them what they thought they wanted to hear. And so sure, if we're not in the courtroom, it's hard to understand how certain verdicts are arrived at. But let's not delude ourselves. I'm sure sometimes there are facts we, the general public, aren't privy to that would make a confounding verdict less confounding. But sometimes it's just bias and corruption. Sometimes it's lazy cops and lawyers who would rather play on the public's fears for the easy W than dig in and do the work to find the real culprit. Or maybe sometimes they know who the real culprit is, but would rather have us all believe a different narrative. I'd like to think we're all a little smarter now and less prone to be drawn in by false narratives about whole groups of people based on what they look like, but, I don't think we are. If anything, it seems to be getting worse, especially now that some of us are finally coming to terms with the fact that many of those responsible for the worst crimes against women and children are not roving bands of Satan worshippers or kids listening to gangster rap, but are indeed rich white men. I hate to say I told you so, but it's up to us to remember we are all we've got. It's up to us to hold each other up. It's up to us to hold each other accountable. In a world of Fogelmans, Gitchels, and Ridges, let's be Lori Davises. Next time on Strange and Unexplained. In October of 2024, I looked at the similarities between Trump and Hitler's rhetoric in the face of popular comparisons at the time. We'll revisit that episode and look at updates to see where things stand today. Spoiler alert, Trump is not Hitler. Strange and Unexplained is a production of Three Goose Entertainment and Grab Bag Collab. This episode was written by me, Daisy Egan, with research by Joe Gradette, Becca DiGregorio, and me. Editorial help by Becca DiGregorio, audio engineering and design by Jeff Devine, music by Epidemic and Blue Dot Sessions. If you have an idea for an episode or want to submit a question for an Ask Me Anything episode, head to strangeandunexplainedpod.com and fill out the contact form. I will write back. Eventually. I need an assistant. You can follow me on social media at Daisy Egan or follow the show at SNU Pod and Grab Bag Collab. Stay strange.